Welcome to this section on resources, images, app icons, and launch screens in iOS. First, you're going to learn about resources and in particular how iOS packages the resources when your app is bundled for release. Then we'll look at images, how to add images to our app, also how to display them both through using the designer and programmatically. I'm also going to discuss the differences between loading images from bundle or from file, and there are some important memory considerations inside of that. Then we're going to take a look at app icons, and that's the top image on your screen. The app icon really has to sell your app to the user. I run you through also how to create app icons and how to use free web services to do all of the heavy lifting for you. Finally, we look at launch screens. Launch screens are a required element of app submissions to the App Store. They also help you to reinforce your brand or your app's image when it first loads. Before we dive into images, we need to learn how iOS stores them and accesses them whenever we compile our app. So in Xamarin, let's open a new iOS single view app, call it whatever. Let's have this image tutorial and go ahead and create that. Now when you compile an iOS app, everything gets bundled into the root directory of the app. So if I come over to my resources folder, and typically you would store whatever music files or images you want to store inside of here, I can right click it, I can add a file, and I can browse to where my files are. So in my downloads I have this horse.jpg. You can put in any image file you like. I'm going to drop that in and copy it. Alternatively you can move it, but it's up to you. Copy to the directory. So now we have this horse.jpg. If I right click this horse.jpg and go to build action, there are a couple of options. We have compile, embedded resource, etc., etc. You would think by default you would have this as an image asset, but this is actually a bundle resource. We'll cover image assets later. And bundle resource informs our compiler that we would like to put this in the root directory. So what does that mean exactly? Well, come up to build, click build all, and then once it's finished building, we're going to right click the top level solution and go to reveal in Finder. Then I'm going to open up this folder, go to the bin because this is the build folder, iPhone simulator, the debug build, and there we have our application. You can right click it, show package contents, and we have all of the files in that single folder. You'll notice horse.jpg is also inside of that single folder. However, that's not to say we can't use folder structures inside of this finished app. So come back by one, and what I'm going to do is simply remove these three files under debug. So Command and backspace will delete them. Then come back to Xamarin, right click our resources, let's add a new folder and call it My Images. Then drag the horse into My Images, and again, let's build. You can hit Command B to do this via shortcut. Right click image to it, reveal in Finder, and there we have our newly compiled app. Let's right click and show package contents, and there is no horse.jpg, but there is a My Images, and inside of there a horse.jpg. Now, we haven't covered how to show this image inside of Xamarin yet, but you can imagine if we're showing an image, our designer is actually going to require this name, And if it's embedded inside a folder structure, it's going to require the path to the actual file as well. In the subsequent lecture, I'll show you how to display this image and also how to display it if it's embedded within a folder. So now that we have some images inside of my images folder, or just one image, we need a way to actually display this inside of Xamarin. Let's open up our main.storyboard and explore the first way, which is to set it using this GUI editor or the designer. Over in our toolbox, let's type image view, and we can drag one into our box, and we can do the usual pinning of constraints and what have you. So I'll just pin these to the sides, and then once we've done that, I'm going to discuss exactly how we show images. Okay, so we have this image. If we click the image view, come over to our properties section, we already know about setting a name, so we won't set that currently. If we scroll down inside of the image view section, we can click image down, and Xamarin will automatically find all of the compatible image files inside of our project and present us a list. So I can click horse.jpg. Now the first thing you'll notice is that this is the wrong aspect ratio. You can set the aspect ratio in the view section just below the image view, and this is known as the mode. When you click the mode box down, there are various ways of doing it. We can have center, and this will just take the full resolution of the image and center it inside of your box. We can have aspect fit, and that fits the image to whatever box you have and leaves clear bars either on the top and bottom or the sides. Or you can have aspect fill, which actually fills the image view, and when this is shown to the user, these clipped sections of the image on the left and right won't actually be seen. The design is just showing us to let us know what is being clipped. So let's leave it as aspect fill, and of course, if we hit play on our simulator, let's double check that those edges are clipped, and they should be. So if we flick between the two, yes, it appears that we are missing a whole section of the horse on the side there. It's just going a bit off the right hand side of the screen because I haven't done my constraints quite right. Okay, so now that's an image view that's been created inside of our designer. But what if we wanted to create an image view programmatically? Well, let's look at that inside of the view controller. But first, let's remove this current image view. So select it and hit backspace so it disappears. Save the file, open viewcontroller.cs. Inside of view.didLoad, let's create a var image view equal to a new UI image view. And this requires a frame. So let's have a new core graphics.cg rect, and let's make the rectangle for this frame. I'm going to have this at 0, 0, and then I'm going to give it a width that corresponds to the width of my view. So let's have view.bounds.width, and let's do the same with the height. View.bounds.height. Okay, so we have our image view. Currently, there's nothing displaying in it. So let's set the image mode first. Image view dot mode, and this is known as the content mode, equal to UI view content mode dot, and we have the same list of options we had in the designer. So let's have scale aspect fit for this one. Now we can set the image. Image view dot image, and you'll notice this requires a UI image, is equal to UI image dot from. And we have two options here, from bundle or from file. We also have from image. We're only going to look at from file and from bundle because these are the two that you'll use the most often. Now, when should you use from bundle or from file? Because they produce the same result essentially to the end user. Well, from bundle stores a cache of the image, which means that if you're using a certain image multiple times, then it's probably more efficient to use from bundle because you already have a cache of that image. The flip side of that is you're using memory to create that cache, so you might run into memory problems if you're using from bundle for lots of individual files. From file grabs the image, loads it up, and then releases the resources and doesn't actually store a cache of that image. So something like a photo gallery would use from file because you'd only use each image once. If you had, for example, a photo app and you were editing an image and you wanted to show that image multiple times, you would use from bundle because you'd only really want to load it once and then use the cache from that point. So let's have from file, and this requires a string file name, and this string is relative to the root of your project. So in our case, we have my images / horse.jpg. Okay, so we have the image set. We have one last thing to do, and that is view.add our image view. Don't forget this step, otherwise we won't be able to see it. Let's hit play, and that should scale an image view to the size of our screen, set the aspect fit, and load up our horse.jpg. Right, and there we have it. So, in this lecture, you've discovered how to set a UI image view inside of Storyboard and set the image within that. You've also discovered how to create an image from programmatic code, and of course you can combine the two. There's no problems with that. You've also learnt, very importantly, the difference between from bundle and from file. So far we've discussed how to add a plain image and load it up inside of an image view. Now, since iOS 7, there's actually a preferred way of handling images on iOS, and this takes into account the resolution of the device that you're running on. So what it does is this special way of handling images requests a certain resolution of image to match the device that it is running on. And this is performed using image sets. So if we right click our images.xcassettes folder and we just expand that temporarily, we'll notice we already have a folder in there called app icon set, and if we right click the images.xcassettes we can add a new image set. Now when this is created and we go ahead and expand that folder, we have a contents.json, and if we open that we get this presentation of a vector 1x, 2x and 3x. Now what do these mean? Well, the 1x would run on the original iPhone, the iPhone 3G and older iPod Touch models. The 2x would run on the iPhone or Retina resolution devices such as the iPad or iPhone 4S and iPhone 5. I believe the image at 2x also runs on the iPhone 6. The image of 3x runs on the iPhone 6 Plus because that's quite a high resolution device. Regardless of which device it runs on, we want to fill in the 1, 2 and 3. I wouldn't worry right now about the R4. I believe that's the Retina iPhone 4. So we're just going to concentrate on universal 1, 2, and 3. There is one final further option, and that is a vector. Now this, if we click it, requests a PDF file. And this is a sort of pseudo vector. So a PDF is a vectored file, and when your app is compiled, Xamarin or the iOS compiler will take that PDF file and create 1x, 2x, and 3x files out of it. So the PDF inside of the vector file should always be at the 1x resolution you need. Right, we're just going to concentrate on 1, 2, and 3 here so you can get the basics of what they are. Let's create the 1, 2, and 3x versions of our horse file. So I've got Photoshop open, but of course you could do this in any photo editing program. I'm first going to create an image, and let's make this an image size of, say, 480 by 360. Then what I'm going to do is save this as horse, and this requires a special naming convention for the 1, 2, and 3x. So this is going to be my at 3x.jpg. And go ahead and save that. Then you'd have to downscale your image. So we'd want image size, and then we will want 2/3 of what we previously had, which would be 320. I would go ahead, click OK. I would save that, and the convention for saving this is at 2x. Then I would change my image size again, and I would drop it to 160 for the 1 times. And then I would save that, but this would just be named horse.jpg. It doesn't need an at times 1. So I'll just replace the one I've already got. Okay, I have my 3 files. Now I can select them underneath this universal tab. I can drop in my horse in 1x. I can carry on with the 2x, and of course the 3x. And I have my 3 files set up. Now I'll save that, head on to my main storyboard. I'm going to drop in my image view again. And of course we can click our image down over in the properties box. And we now have this item called image. If I click it, we get a picture of our horse. Now why is it called image? Well, that's because we didn't set the name over on the folder inside images.xcassettes. So you would call this horse.imageset, for example. So that covers the special convention of 1x, 2x, and 3x, which started since iOS 7. You cannot run this on iOS 6. Vector takes in a PDF and creates these files for you automatically. And it's a new way of doing things since iOS 8, but I believe most developers currently use the 1 to 3x versions. Now, just before we end this lecture, I just want to show you one of my favorite tools, and I don't know who made it, I don't know the guy, but I like it so much that I actually wanted to let you see what it is. It's this asset catalog creator that you'll find on the App Store. And I've paid £3 for my version. And what this does is it grabs an image for you and creates these image sets that you can simply import straight into Xamarin. And out of all of the tools I've ever paid for, this one by far has saved me so much time. So I can really recommend it. I believe there's a free version. Yes, there is. I'm not quite sure what the limitations are on that. But of course, you can try that out. Okay, that sums up how to add an image set in Xamarin.ios and how we specify these 1, 2, and 3x files, which show differently depending on what kind of device screen we are running our app on. let's discuss and create some application icons for our iOS app. Now, to the uninitiated, and I'm sure you know this, the application icon is this icon that represents your app on the iOS home screen. So if I click News, it opens up News from that icon. It should go without saying that your app icon should be distinctive. So for example, Apple's calendar, Sunday 21st, screams calendar at you. So does Maps. Photos, I'm not so sure, but they've built up a recognition by now, so we recognize photos. Now, application icons don't just appear here, they also appear in the app switcher, for example. So right at the top of the screen, you can see all of our fake icons from our previous apps we've created. And we also have these ones for Photos and Game Center. They also will appear when you have a swipe down notification, or when we just simply swipe down and go to the task spotlight. There are no spotlights in the simulator, incidentally. Right, so we have to create effectively an image set like we did in the last lecture, but this is a specialized one for app icons. So head over to Xamarin, and you'll notice we already have an app icons.icon set. The reason that exists is because you have to have app icons to submit to the App Store for obvious reasons. If we open up our contents.json, you will see a bewildering array of app icons. We have all of these file sizes that we have to create because we have so many devices, resolutions, and so much fragmentation nowadays for iOS. So of course, you could make all of these from hand inside of Photoshop, but that's going to take you a very long time. You could also use the image asset catalog creator that I showed you in the last lecture. But if you don't want to pay for anything, you have a third option, and that is to jump onto Google and search for app icon generator or creator. And I've got this one site called Make App Icon. You can upload your file in JPEG, PNG, or PSD rather. You can pop your horse file in, and what it's going to do is load it all up for you. Just a word of warning, app icons are square. So 80 by 80, 100 by 100. They need to be square, otherwise the ratio will be wrong. Like you can see in this image, the horse is quite skewed. So once you've done that, they will create all of the relevant required app icons for you and allow you to download them. Once you've downloaded them, you can then import them into your images.x cassettes. You can add your files. And what I would do is add files from folder or add an existing folder and drop them in. Then, if you want to change your used icon set, open up your info.plist, scroll down until we come to our, have I just missed it? Yes, I have, our universal icons. Now we have a source, and we can hit app icons. When you create a new app icon set, it will be picked up by this info plist, and you can change it inside of here. Let's move on to the final part of this little section on images in iOS. The final thing we have to look at is the launch screen. So if I open up, for example, my first app, the launch screen is what's shown there, just before the app loads. So if we come over to our Xamarin and we open up our info.plist, you'll notice Universal Launch Images has a don't use asset catalogs. Okay, so we're not using catalogs in the same way that we would with app icons. Now this used to be how launch images were defined. You'd have to create an image for each device and resolution. Now, however, you can set a launch screen. And this is a zip file which is contained under resources. So if I go ahead and double click launch screen.zib, you'll see the items that were shown to us when we loaded up our app. This is a label and a label. So this is a much better way of doing launch screens. Instead of creating 10 different size screens, what we can do is have a sort of pseudo storyboard in the designer that allows us to have what we like. So you can go ahead and delete labels in here, and you can drag in your own items from the toolbox. But be aware that things like buttons will not work, because this isn't a dynamic screen. The user cannot interact with it. You also can't have animated controls, I believe. This has to be a static image. So you should use this launch screen as reinforcement of your branding or of what your app does. So I'm going to drop in a label and call it launch. And then I'm just going to increase the size, and of course the same pinning constraints also apply to the launch screen, so you can pin your items. Okay, and now if we hit play, our launch screen will be changed for us. And there we have our spectacular launch screen. Okay, stop that running. So that now is a much easier way than how iOS used to do it with all of the multiple images and what have you. I'm kind of holding out hope that they do the same thing with the app icon, because it would be a lot easier for us as developers to make those icons. Right, that concludes this lecture on the launch screen inside of iOS apps. Okay, well done. You've completed this section on resources, images, icons, and launch screens. You've learnt how resources work on iOS, and how iOS likes to bundle all of the included resources into the base project folder when it's compiled. You've also looked at images, how to add them to the project, either through just a normal image or through an image set. You also learned how to display that image in a UI image view, both through the designer and programmatically. I walked you through creating app icons and the bewildering number of icons you need. I also showed you some free software on the web, makeappicon.com, that allows you to do this automatically. Finally, I showed you launch screens, which use zip files, and that is a vast improvement over previous launch screens where you had to create a different size file for every device out there.